My son-in-law grabbed my daughter's arm at dinner, hard enough to make her stumble while his father laughed it off. I saw the bruises she tried to hide, and the way her eyes begged me not to say a word. That night, I walked home in silence. But the next time he saw me, I wasn't just her father. I was the man quietly taking his whole world apart. Before I go on, I just want to thank you for being here. These stories carry years of quiet truths I've held close to my chest, and sharing them isn't always easy. If you'd like to hear more from an old man who's weathered a few storms, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. And let me know where you're listening from. Your support, it means more than you know. Most mornings in my house begin the same way. I sit by the kitchen window with a mug of coffee warming my hands, watching the light stretch across the yard like it's taking its time waking up. At my age, you learn to appreciate slow beginnings, the kind that don't demand anything from you except presence. I've lived in this house for over 40 years, raised my daughter Claire here, buried my wife's favorite rosebush near the back fence when she passed. Every creak of the floorboards, every dent in the old pine table, it all holds a memory. And for the longest time, I carried a simple peace. My days were quiet, predictable, gentle. Claire used to visit every Friday after work. She'd let herself in with that soft knock she's had since she was a little girl. "Dad, I brought you something," she'd say, and walk in holding a bag of groceries she insisted I didn't need. We'd laugh about it, cook together, and she'd tell me about her week while I sliced vegetables too slowly for her liking. She had a warmth to her, a light behind her eyes, the kind that made you believe she grew up into the woman her mother always hoped she'd be. When she introduced me to Evan, I honestly tried, to see what she saw. He was polite, at least in front of strangers, talked about work like it was a battlefield only he could survive, carried himself with that quiet confidence some men wear like armor. But there were moments, little ones, where something tightened in his jaw when Claire spoke. Moments where he didn't look at her, he looked through her. Moments where he tried a little too hard to impress, as if affection were a performance and respect were optional. I noticed. Fathers notice. We just pretend we don't, because we want to believe our children have chosen happiness. Still, I held my peace. And for a while, things seemed steady enough. They married in a small ceremony. Claire smiled, though I remember thinking it reached her lips faster than it reached her eyes. They had Landon 2 years later, a bright, sweet boy who clung to his mother like she was his whole world. And she was. Their visits grew less frequent after that. At first, it was work, then exhaustion, then bad timing, then nothing at all unless I asked. I didn't push. Older men learned to pick their battles, and I refused to let worry turn into accusation. But small things kept showing through the cracks. When Claire hugged me goodbye, her shoulders felt tense beneath her coat. When I asked how she was, she hesitated before answering. When she laughed, it carried a softness from before and a strain from now. Still, I trusted her to come to me if she needed to. One evening, I stopped by their house unannounced with a loaf of banana bread, my wife's old recipe. Landon opened the door with a bruise on his wrist, said he'd fallen. Evan appeared behind him, smiling too broadly, telling me they were in the middle of something and couldn't visit that weekend. Claire stood in the background, hands clasped, lips pressed thin. She didn't say a word, didn't look up, didn't try to meet my eyes. I drove home with that loaf untouched on the passenger seat, wondering when my daughter's world had grown so silent. Still, I tried to convince myself everything was fine. You tell yourself stories like that when the truth feels too heavy. But my peace, my quiet, steady life, kept slipping, little by little, like someone was pulling a thread I couldn't see. And then, one night, Claire showed up at my door. It was late, well past when she usually called. She knocked softly, the way she always had, but this time there was no warmth in it. Only hesitation. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without a word. Her face looked pale, drawn, tired in a way that didn't belong to someone her age. She tried to smile. It barely held. "Sorry to come by late, Dad," she whispered. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and that's when I saw it. A faint mark along her jaw, small, but unmistakable. She turned her head away quickly, pretending to look at the clock. I didn't ask. She didn't explain. We sat in the living room while the old floor lamp hummed quietly beside us. She talked about work, errands, daycare, everything except the thing she was hiding. When she finally left that night, She hugged me tighter than usual, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt fear settle in my chest. I didn't know the full story yet, but something had shifted. Something dark had entered her home, and though I didn't understand it then, that silence was the last real peace I'd feel for a long time. The night everything cracked wide open didn't begin dramatically. It started with a simple invitation. Claire called and asked if I wanted to come over for dinner. Her voice sounded thin, as if something inside her was already fraying. I brought a pie from the bakery down the road, the kind she loved growing up. When I knocked, Evan answered the door with that rehearsed smile he wore around company. "Good to see you, sir," he said, stepping aside. But the moment I walked in, I felt it, a heaviness in the air, the kind that settles before a storm. Claire was setting the table. Her movements were careful, too careful, like someone trying not to make a single wrong sound. She avoided my eyes, but when she finally glanced up, something inside me tightened. She wasn't just tired. She was frightened. During dinner, Landon sat beside her, clinging to her arm. Evan talked about work, about numbers, about promotions he deserved. His father, who'd joined for the evening, laughed at every boast. The whole meal felt precarious, like a glass balanced too close to the edge. Then it happened. Claire reached for the serving spoon. Evan's father made a joke at her expense, light on the surface, sharp underneath. Something about her not being smart enough to understand Evan's work stress. She went still. Just still. A long, hollow silence followed. Evan leaned over and grabbed her arm, hard enough that she lost her grip and dropped the spoon. It clattered loud against the plate. She flinched. He squeezed tighter. "Come on, Claire. Don't embarrass me," he muttered through clenched teeth. I felt the room tilt. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lunge across the table, didn't let rage control me. But my chair scraped back slowly as I stood. "Let go of her," I said quietly. Evan froze. His father looked up, surprised, offended even. "Relax," the old man scoffed. "They're married. Couples argue." My eyes never left Evan's hand. Let go. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe it was the years of patience behind it. But Evan released her, too quickly, as if realizing he'd been seen. Claire kept her gaze down, blinking fast, trying to gather herself. Evan forced a laugh. "You're overreacting, sir. She's just sensitive tonight." The callousness of it made something cold settle in my chest. Dinner limped on. No one ate much. The air stayed sharp. When I rose to leave, Claire walked me to the door. Evan and his father stayed in the dining room, arguing in low voices about appearances and respect. Claire opened the door, but she didn't step aside immediately. She stood there, shoulders shaking, eyes shining with a quiet, desperate apology she couldn't speak aloud. When she finally lifted her chin, I saw it again. A bruise along her jawline, faint beneath makeup. My stomach dropped. "Claire," I whispered. "Has he—" "Dad," her voice cracked. "Please, not here." I swallowed the question. She wasn't ready. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead briefly against my shoulder. "Just a second," a plea without words. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I promise. I just need to get through tonight." I cupped her cheek gently. She closed her eyes like the touch hurt and healed her at the same time. "Call me if you need me," I said. She nodded, but sighed in a way that felt like surrender. I walked to my car slowly, forcing myself not to look back. But once I sat behind the wheel, I watched her silhouette through the window as she returned inside. Her steps were small, cautious, measured, like someone walking back into a cage. I sat there for nearly a minute, hands gripping the wheel. The porch light flickered as she closed the door, and through the glass, I saw Evan take her by the elbow again, guiding her, directing her, owning her space. Something inside me cracked, but that wasn't the worst part. An hour after I got home, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Sorry about tonight. Everything's fine." But the message didn't feel like her. The words were too stiff, too careful, as if typed with someone watching. I stared at the screen, the cold weight in my chest spreading. Then another message came, "Please don't come by unannounced anymore." That was the moment the truth stopped whispering and finally shouted. Evan wasn't just controlling her. He was isolating her. I set the phone down slowly, very slowly, and in the quiet of my living room, with the lamp casting soft shadows across the floor, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam a fist. But something deep inside me went still. Very still. The kind of stillness a man settles into when patience is no longer peace, but preparation. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. After Evan walked off my porch that night, the house fell into a silence so deep it felt almost physical, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Not the soft quiet I'd grown used to over the years, but a heavy, uneasy calm that settles after something cracks. Claire curled up on the couch, knees pulled tight, shoulders trembling beneath the blanket I draped over her. She looked small in a way she never should have had to look. I set a glass of water on the table beside her, then sat nearby, not touching, not crowding, just present. "Dad, I didn't want you to see any of this," she whispered. I didn't answer right away. I took off my glasses, cleaned them with the corner of my shirt even though they were spotless. An old habit I fall back on when my heart's too full to speak. "You don't have to protect him anymore," I finally said. Claire shook her head. "I'm not protecting him. I'm protecting Landon and myself. You don't understand how he gets. When he's angry." Her voice cut off. She looked at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Her knuckles were red. The skin pulled tight. My throat tightened. I walked to the kitchen and filled the kettle. The quiet whistle. The steam rising, simple things, but familiar ones. I poured her chamomile tea, the same kind her mother used to make her on long nights. She didn't drink it, just traced the rim with her fingertip, small circles that looked more like apologies than comfort. She fell asleep upright on the couch. Exhaustion pulled her under like a tide. I covered her gently, turned off the lamp, and stood there a long time watching her breathe. My daughter. The girl who once built entire cardboard kingdoms in our living room. The teenager who painted sunrise after sunrise because she said it felt like hope. How had she ended up here? With a man who dimmed every bit of light she carried. Later in the hallway, I paused at her childhood photo. 16 years old, holding up her first sketchbook, pride written all over her face. I ran my thumb along the frame. Something inside me ached in a way I hadn't felt since losing her mother. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. I lay in bed listening to the house settle, the heater ticking, the faint sound of Claire breathing in the next room, and beneath all of it, the memory of Evan's voice, hard, dismissive, careless. I stared at the ceiling until the first gray hint of dawn. When I walked into the kitchen, Claire was already awake, sitting at the table, hands wrapped around the mug she hadn't touched last night. Her eyes were swollen, but her back was straight, trying to be strong in a way that broke me even more. "I shouldn't stay long," she said, forcing a small smile. "He'll get upset." A coldness ran down my spine. "Claire, upset people talk. Abusive people act." She flinched, just enough to confirm everything I already feared. Then she whispered the sentence that changed everything. "He said I push his buttons, that I should know better by now." I felt something inside me fall completely still. I reached for her hand, slow and steady. When she didn't pull away, I held it gently. "Claire," I said, "love shouldn't hurt like this." A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. For the rest of the morning, we stayed quiet. She dozed in the chair while I pretended to tinker in the shed, banging tools together without purpose, just trying to breathe through the ache. Around evening, she said she had to go home. I walked her to her car. Every part of me wanted to grab her keys, hide them, beg her to stay. But pushing too hard might have driven her straight back into his arms. She promised to call when she got home. She didn't. I sat in my living room waiting anyway, staring at my phone, each passing minute tightening the knot in my chest. And then, at 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message. "I'm sorry, Dad." Just that. 3 small words. 3 terrifying words. Because apologies like that don't come from safety. They come from fear. I stood up, walked to the porch, came back inside, sat down, stood again. Every instinct screamed to drive over, kick down the door, and take her away. But I remembered something the retired sheriff once told me. Move too fast, and you'll trigger the very danger you're trying to prevent. So I took a long breath, forced my hands to steady, and for the first time in my life, I began to think like a man preparing for a different kind of fight. Not with fists, not with anger, but with patience, with strategy, with love sharpened into resolve, because if my daughter was in danger, I needed to move carefully. But once I moved, I would not stop. The night Claire sent that final message, "I'm sorry, Dad." I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair long after midnight, the lamp humming softly beside me, my hands folded, my heart stubbornly awake. It was a strange kind of stillness, not panic, not fury, just a deep awareness that something had crossed a line. Fear sharpened into clarity, and clarity sharpened into resolve. No rushing, no reckless moves, no storming into a house controlled by a man who fed on intimidation. If I wanted to protect my daughter, I had to move with patience, not force. That's when the planning began. At sunrise, I drove to the small hardware store on the edge of town and bought a basic flip phone, the kind people overlook. A smartphone leaves trails. A flip phone leaves time. Every bruise I'd seen, every strange message, every canceled visit, every shift in Claire's eyes when she claimed she was fine. Dates, descriptions, patterns. I printed the photos I'd taken of her jaw, quiet proof she never meant for me to see. I didn't analyze them, didn't linger, just placed them neatly into a manila folder. That folder felt heavier than paper. It felt like truth. 2 days later, I drove to the home of Brooke, the young woman who'd babysat Landon since he was a toddler. She opened the door with tired eyes, eyes that knew more than someone her age should. "Mr. Hale, is everything all right?" "No," I said, "but I'm trying to make it right." She hesitated, then stepped aside and led me to her small kitchen. I didn't pressure her. I just told her, in a quiet voice, that I was worried for my daughter, and I needed to understand what she'd been living with. Brooke's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "I didn't want Claire to lose her job or her home, but I saw things I shouldn't have seen." She swallowed hard, eyes filling. Then she told me about the time she walked into the living room and found Evan with both hands around Claire's throat, about how Claire insisted it was an argument, about how Brooke instinctively snapped a picture before fear made her delete it from her phone. But she hadn't deleted it from her cloud. She retrieved it for me. Her voice shook, but her courage didn't. I thanked her quietly, left the house, sat in my truck, and let the weight of what I'd heard settle. Not rage, not shock, just a slow, steady transformation inside me. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was truth. And truth demands action. When I got home, I made 2 calls, careful, vague, deliberate. One to a retired sheriff I'd known for decades. One to a legal aid counselor in the next county. I didn't give names, didn't accuse anyone, just asked, if a woman is afraid to speak, how does her father help her safely? Both gave the same advice: document everything. Don't confront him. Support her decisions. And when she asks for help, move fast and clean. I wrote those words down like a blueprint. The following weekend, while Claire thought I was away fishing, I gave my home new purpose. I changed the locks, installed 2 cameras on the porch, cleared out the spare room she used as a teenager, fresh sheets, warm lighting, a basket with Landon's favorite snacks. On the dresser, I placed a framed photo from the year she graduated high school, her smile wide, her future bright, her confidence unshaken. A reminder of who she was before someone tried to dim her light, a reminder of who she could be again. Over the next week, I sent gentle messages every morning, just checking in. "I love you." Sometimes she replied. Sometimes she didn't. Both answers worried me. One night she sent a photo of Landon asleep on her chest. A sweet moment, except her eyes in the picture were swollen, distant, hollowed by something she wasn't ready to name. I saved the photo. Another piece of truth. And through it all, a single thought circled back to me with calm certainty. My son-in-law thought I'd stay silent. But silence, used wisely, becomes a shield and a weapon. I didn't know when Claire would reach her breaking point. I just knew she would. Men like Evan always escalate. They don't stop until someone stops them. On the 8th night at 11:42 p.m., my phone rang. Claire's name. Her breath shaky, her voice thin as paper. "Dad, please don't hang up." I stood immediately. "What's happening?" She didn't answer directly. "Can we come home tonight?" The world narrowed to a single point. "Yes," I said. "Tell me where you are." "No," she whispered. "Don't come here. Just wait. We're leaving now." Behind her, a crash, a shout, the unmistakable sound of fear. "Claire, Claire, talk to me." Her voice trembled. "I'm trying." And then the line went dead. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. But not the soft kind. The kind that means a storm is finally, irrevocably, breaking. I stood in the doorway of my home with the porch light glowing against the dark. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. I stood at the doorway long after Claire's call ended, the porch light casting a pale circle on the gravel path. The air was cold enough to sting, but I barely felt it. My whole body was listening, waiting, for the sound of a car breaking through the quiet. Some silences are gentle. This one was a warning. I didn't sit. I didn't pace. I just stood there with my hands resting on the porch rail, breathing slowly so I wouldn't fall apart before she got to me. When headlights finally appeared far down the road, swaying slightly as they approached, I stepped forward. Gravel shifted under my boots as I moved toward the gate. And as the car rolled into the driveway, barely stopping before the engine sputtered out, I saw her. Claire, eyes red. Lips split. A bruise across her cheek she hadn't had the night before. And Landon curled against her, clutching her shirt with small, trembling fingers. She opened her door with shaking hands, but couldn't get the seatbelt undone. I leaned in, unlatched it gently, and lifted my grandson into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder, exhausted from crying. Claire whispered, "Dad, I'm sorry, you don't have to explain right now," I said softly. "Come inside." Inside the house, I locked the door, deadbolt, latch, security bar. The clicks felt like armor sliding into place. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, her hands twisted in her lap. She didn't look like the woman she once was. She looked like someone who'd been surviving instead of living. After a while, she spoke through a trembling exhale. "He pushed me tonight," she murmured. "Told me I made him angry. Told me I should know better than to set him off. And when Landon cried, he grabbed him too." Her voice wavered. "I thought he was going to hurt him, Dad." Hearing that, it didn't ignite rage in me. It hollowed me out. A clean, cold clarity filled the space where fury could have lived. I didn't shout, didn't curse his name, didn't swear revenge. I just placed my hand over hers, steady and warm. "You're not going back," I said. "Not now, not ever." Her breath broke in a soft sob, but for the first time that night, she didn't look afraid. She looked relieved. She fell asleep soon after, exhaustion pulling her under. I covered her with a blanket, checked on Landon, then stepped outside onto the porch and made the call I had been preparing for weeks. Deputy Harper answered on the second ring. "Is she with you?" she asked. "Yes." "Is she hurt?" "Yes." "Then stay put. We're coming." No panic, no hesitation, just action. 28 minutes later, the driveway lit up again, not with fear this time, but with authority. 2 patrol cars pulled in quietly. Harper stepped out, expression firm and steady. "Where is she?" she asked. "Sleeping," I said. "Good. She needs it." Behind her, another officer carried the folder, the one filled with photos, dates, statements, the truth we had gathered piece by piece. He lifted it slightly. "This is more than enough." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For months, I'd feared no one would hear her. Now, the law itself was listening. They didn't leave a moment to chance. Within the hour, they drove to Evan Turner's house. Claire didn't have to be there. She didn't have to testify or confront him that night. The evidence did the talking for her. When Deputy Harper called me the next morning, her voice carried a quiet certainty. "It's done, Mr. Hale. He's in custody. No bail tonight." I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I just sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, letting the quiet settle back into my home, the safe kind of quiet, not the fragile one Claire had been living with. 2 weeks later, we sat side by side in a courtroom that felt too large and too bright. Evan was led in wearing a jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look confident. He looked cornered. He saw Claire. Then he saw me. His expression changed, not into guilt, not into remorse, but into realization. Realization that the man he'd dismissed as old and harmless had dismantled his control piece by piece, quietly, methodically, without ever raising his voice. The judge read the charges, serious ones that would follow him for a long time. Evan looked at me as if expecting outrage or triumph or some emotional flair he could use to blame us for his downfall. He got none. I simply met his stare with the same calm patience he had mistaken for weakness. A long silence filled the courtroom, heavy, unavoidable, final. And in that silence, I finally felt free. The months that followed felt like watching a wounded garden slowly learn how to grow again. Nothing bloomed overnight, nothing healed in a straight line. But little by little, life found its way back into my home. A pair of tiny shoes appeared beside the front door. Crayon drawings began covering the fridge again. Landon's laughter drifted through the hallway the way sunlight breaks through heavy clouds. And Claire. She moved through her days like someone learning the rhythm of her own heartbeat again. She still startled at loud noises, still double-checked the locks, still had nights where she sat at the edge of her bed, breathing through the ghosts of old fear. But she was healing. Not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, quiet steps that belonged entirely to her. She started painting again. Started humming while she cooked. Started smiling, not the forced, fragile smile I'd seen for years, but the real one, the one that reached her eyes. The day she filled out her legal separation paperwork, she came home and sat with me on the porch. The sun was setting behind the trees, and her hands shook just slightly as she passed me the pen. "I feel like myself again," she whispered. "Or, at least the beginning of myself." That was enough for me, more than enough. I often sit alone at night after she and Landon have gone to sleep, thinking about everything that happened, how close I came to losing her, how long she suffered without speaking, how silence kept her trapped, until silence, used differently, set her free. And every time I think about Evan, the man who tried to control her, diminish her, isolate her, I return to the same truth. My son-in-law thought I'd stay silent. He thought age made me harmless. He thought softness made me weak. But he didn't understand the kind of strength a father carries. He didn't understand the patience of a man who has lived long enough to know that justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives the way dawn does, quietly, inevitably, changing everything it touches. Now, when Claire tucks Landon into bed without fear, when she sits beside me on the porch with her tea, when she laughs softly at something small, I realize revenge was never the point. Peace was. Safety was. Respect was. And respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait long enough and move when the moment is right. If this had been your family, would you have done the same? I'd like to hear your thoughts. And if my story meant something to you, don't forget to subscribe for the next one.